truly regret that. I take full responsibility for this. I invited my colleagues there. I was of the clear view that we were complying with the Open for Summer rules, but it is clear that some of us were not distanced the whole night, and I have to take responsibility for that. We have to set a higher example, a higher threshold of conduct, and so I want sincerely to apologize to my colleagues and to Albertans for letting you down, for not being more careful to scrupulously follow every aspect of the public health guidelines that we expect of everyone. And so I sincerely regret that the decision that we made. We should have taken extra precautions to be distanced, and I just won't be doing any social gatherings until we get into phase 3, just to avoid any possible mistakes or misunderstandings. So I sincerely apologize again. I take full responsibility, and I hope to learn from this, as I say, in ensuring that we not be put in a position of violating the distance guidelines and the other important public health measures which remain in place until we get to phase 3. And with that, I'm happy to take your questions.
Perfect. We'll now go to the phones for questions. 2 questions each, either 1 question, 1 follow-up, or 2 off the top. Operator, can you please put through our first caller?
James Keller, Globe and Mail.
Hi, Premier. Your initial reaction to this outdoor dinner was to insist you didn't do anything wrong. Members of your staff were mocking people online for suggesting otherwise. And you handled the issue of the international travel at Christmas essentially in the same way. So how do you expect Albertans to believe that this apology, or really any other apology that follows this playbook, is actually sincere?
Well, I'll just restate what the point I've made, which is that I knew we were doing this outdoor gathering in full public view, in the understanding that we were complying with the rules, and particularly given the 10-person outdoor gathering rule that which we brought into effect on Tuesday morning. And I've been encouraging Albertans to move things outdoors. I honestly believed it was better to meet outdoors than indoors. I've held many meetings on that deck over the course of the past 16 months. And none of those had been controversial. We always try to do that in a socially distanced way. And so, but I've heard people clearly. I've heard from caucus colleagues and others. And we've gone back and reviewed this and realized that not everybody was within, maintained the 2-meter distance throughout. And recognizing that, I'm apologizing for that fact. In terms of, you know, the fact of the matter is that people are permitted to do social outdoor gatherings of up to 10. The rules ask that they maintain that distance. We should have been more careful to do so, and I apologize that we didn't.
Do you have a follow-up, James?
Yeah, you didn't apologize. So your culture minister asked you to also apologize for your comments about cancel culture, just given the news last week. Can you explain what circumstances you'd be fine with renaming buildings and the like? I'm thinking of the Grand and LRT station in Edmonton, or renaming the Langevin School in Calgary. Is that cancel culture? How far does that go?
Well, you know, I'm just going to refer back to the answer I gave to a question last Thursday, I believe, as well as I took some questions on this on the Roy Green show on CMHL and the Chorus Radio Network yesterday afternoon. I think I've spoken to that extensively. I have also spoken extensively to, including in my speech a week ago today in the legislature, on the terrible tragedy and the wickedness of the Indian residential school system, of the unmarked graves that were found recently in Kamloops, of those children, their families, and all of the hundreds of thousands of others who they have come to represent. This is, I believe, the darkest mark in all of Canadian history. And it lasted for the better part of a century under multiple governments. It was a policy implemented by, with a widespread political consensus, a multi-partisan consensus involving civil society, the churches, and local communities. Just as provincial governments were involved in the 60s scoop, which was kind of an echo of the Indian residential school system. all of that is a deeply tragic history from which we must learn, which we must embed in our history education and in our collective memory. And it also impels us to redouble our efforts at reconciliation. So those are, we've all been prompted, I think, to a renewed commitment to that in light of the tragic discovery of these unmarked graves last week. And at the same time, my remarks about trying to kind of efface from our history many of the central figures in building Canada, I think are continue to be true, and those comments were actually echoed by a Liberal Indigenous Relations Minister Mark Miller last week, and so I would say that the recognition of the terrible evil of the Indian residential schools, the formal Government of Canada apology, the compensation, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and all of the other work that is underway must continue. But that should not lead us to efface most of our history, and I'll just refer back to the comments I've made about that in the past.
Operator, can you please put through our next caller?
Bill Fortier, CTV.
Hi, Premier. You admit that distancing rules were broken non-intentionally, and I'm curious how you can expect Albertans to understand, remember, and follow the rules as you've asked them multiple times if the Premier and the Health Minister apparently can't.
Well, actually, he and I were seated more than 2 meters apart, but a couple of the 6 seats were closer than that. What we've always asked is that people do their best. I don't think anybody's walked around for the past 16 months with a 2-meter yardstick. I find myself in lots of circumstances where I'm at gatherings and find myself less than 2 meters from people. I was just in front of one of your TV cameras on Saturday at the vaccine clinic in Northeast Calgary, where a number of the wonderful local volunteers doing brilliant work came to chat and explained to me what they were doing, and I'm pretty sure we were within 2 meters of one another. Often that gets me into what I call the COVID two-step, where I kind of back up and people naturally come within a discussion distance. That I can think that's happened for me dozens of times over the past 16 months. So we've never asked people to walk around with a 2-meter rule stick. We've asked people to exercise good judgment and discretion. We tried to distance out. There were 4 tables there, 6 people spread around. But we should have done better. That's clear. In retrospect, we should have made it impossible for us to be within 2 meters of one another, and I regret that we didn't take that extra precaution.
Do you have a follow-up, Bill?
Yeah, just a quick one, and forgive me if I misheard this. I thought I heard you say that this dinner, as you called it, last week, did you say it was a meeting, that the decision was made to take a meeting outside? And if so, what appeared to be a bottle of whiskey was on the table. So if it was a meeting, I'm wondering if it's customary and normal to have a bottle of whiskey at a meeting. Somebody
gave me one for my 30th birthday. It was scheduled as a business meeting. I decided to take it outside, and in fact, I did so because I thought this could be seen as a social function. We have a total ban on indoor social functions. It was a gathering to discuss government business. That's what we did for 3.5 hours or more on a range of important public issues. I thought it was in an excess of caution best to do that outdoors, where the chances of transmission are radically lower than indoors. Again, that's why we ask people, if they're going to socialize or get together, to do so outside. It's why I've also held meetings on that deck before many times over the past 16 months.
Operator, can you please put through our next caller?
Dean Bennett, Canadian Press.
Hi, Premier. So I'm trying to understand what happened last week. You were pretty careful in what you said. This was not a breach. We saw a picture. Clearly, you're breaking the 2-meter distance, and you're telling Albertans no. What you see in this picture is not what it actually is. Believe me, there is no health violations here. And then when you were asked in the House about it on Thursday, you were very careful to give half an answer. No, we were within the 10-person limit. You never addressed the masks. You never addressed the distancing. It was half an answer. And now you're telling us today, we've done a research, we measured chairs, and now we realize that we weren't within distancing. Premier, I put it to you, sir, that you knew this last week. You saw the picture. You knew that you had broken the rules, but you did it anyway. But you decided for whatever reason that you're going to tell people what they see is not what they see. It was gaslighting, Premier. You did it, and now you're going to apologize today, not because it's wrong, but because you're facing a mini revolt in your cabinet and caucus. Is that true, sir?
Well, Dean, first of all, there is no mask mandate for outdoors whatsoever. There never has been in Alberta. Secondly, the reason we decided to do this was outdoors was because just that day we had permitted 10 people to gather outdoors, and we did try to socially distance with 4 contiguous tables. We measured the diameter around them at 38 feet. A couple of the seats were less than 2 meters apart. And there's no doubt as people moved around in the course of the evening and violated the 2 meters of distancing. So I've reflected on that. I can tell you that none of, like we fully knew we were in public view there. Again, when somebody said, are you sure we should be gathering outdoors? I said, well, it's a lot better than indoors. It's permitted by the rules. We're allowed to follow the rules. We tried to socially distance out there. We didn't do a good enough job of it, and I truly regret that because we should be held to a higher standard, and that falls on me.
And do you have a brief follow-up, Dean?
Yeah, Premier, I don't like to call you out. But I think it's a question that deserves to be asked. It looks to me, in the totality of it, you knew last week you had broken the rules. You decided to gaslight the very people you represent. And that matters because if you'll gaslight us on this, what else will you gaslight us on? So why did you gaslight us last week when you said that you did not break any health rules?
So, Dean, I was, again, we were following the rule for 10 people outdoor gatherings. We had made efforts to socially distance. If we hadn't done that, we could have just gathered around one of these 4 tables. We set up 4 contiguous tables, made a purposeful effort to distance them out, and believed we were in compliance with the rules. We've taken a closer look at this. We've heard from people, and that's why I acknowledge that the social distancing rule was not perfectly followed throughout the evening, and that is for which I accept responsibility and for which I apologize, because we are expected to be at a higher standard. I will say this, Dean, you can go back and I'm sure find lots of pictures. I'm sure people are already looking over the past 16 months and find me at lots of different events where I am within 2 meters of other people. And so I think that is one rule where I and other Albertans have generally tried to be conscious of it and follow it, but probably haven't done it perfectly for the last 16 months. And so I don't want everybody in Alberta to get out there and think that they're in gross violation of the rules if at some point they were 1.5 meters away from somebody at an outdoor function, for example. But we should be kept to a higher standard. I recognize that, I'm acknowledging that, and I'm apologizing for the fact that we didn't meet that standard last Tuesday.
All right, and looks like we have time for one more question. Operator, can you please put through our last caller?
Audrey Nouveau, Radio Canada.
Hi, Premier. Thank you for taking my question. I have a question for you on equalization, if you can answer in French and in English, please. On the motion, if the referendum goes ahead and your government is binded by that, but on what steps exactly? What is it does it have to do?
I'm sorry, could you just clarify? You were asking what do we have to do to make the referendum happen?
No, if the referendum goes ahead and the results come back that Albertans want you to remove that section from the Constitution on equalization, it says that your government it's a binding referendum, but what are you bound to exactly?
Sure.
What steps would you have to do afterwards?
And you'd like that in English and French, right, Audrey?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
So first in English, if a majority of Albertans endorse this proposed constitutional amendment, we would then pass a motion through Alberta's legislature to ratify a proposed constitutional amendment. We would then send that to the Government of Canada and ask for their ratification. I don't expect that to be forthcoming. We would then ask for at least negotiations over the question of equalization in the Constitution. Our judgment is that based on the Quebec secession reference of the Supreme Court of Canada from 1998, that the Government of Canada, a positive vote on a proposed constitutional amendment, if it has a clear question and a clear majority of Albertans vote in favor of it, that those meet the threshold of the Quebec secession reference to compel the Government of Canada to engage in good faith negotiations with Alberta about the proposed constitutional amendment. So essentially, it would lead to legislative ratification of the decision of Albertans seeking that constitutional amendment. That would then trigger negotiations with the Government of Canada. I want to be clear, as I have been from day one on this matter, that we should not expect that a yes vote is immediately going to fundamentally change equalization. We don't have the power unilaterally to do that as a province. But this is a strategy to elevate Alberta's fight for fairness in the Federation to the top of the national agenda, to get Ottawa's attention and to send a message to our friends in the rest of the country that we expect to be treated fairly. We will no longer accept governments erecting barriers, for example, to pipelines, while taking ever-growing equalization transfers from Alberta resources that they're trying to block. So this is a legal tool to make a very strong political point in the strongest way possible to assert our fight for fairness in the Fédération. I'll say that more briefly in French. Si une majorité des Albertains appuie le référendum pour modifier la Constitution en ce qui concerne la péréquation, la législature va endorser cette idée avec une motion qui propose une modification de la Constitution à cet égard, et ça va forcer le gouvernement fédéral, d'après nous, d'ouvrir les pourparlers avec l'Alberta sur la question de péréquation. Ça, c'est effectivement le principe articulé par la Cour suprême du Canada en 1998 dans la référence sur la sécession du Québec, où la Cour suprême a dit que si une claire majorité des électeurs dans une province vote en faveur d'une modification proposée de la Constitution avec une question claire, que le fédéral a une obligation légale de négocier cette question en bonne foi avec la province. Si ça, c'est le principe pour le Québec, ça doit être également le principe pour l'Alberta. Nous savons bien que ça ne changera pas la péréquation tout de suite parce que nous n'avons pas le pouvoir de le faire unilatéralement. Mais ça va élever jusqu'au sommet les demandes essentielles de l'Alberta pour une position plus juste dans la Fédération.
And do you have a brief follow-up, Audrey?
Yes, I do. Switching gears, though, regarding your controversial dinner for which you apologized last week, your former UCP leadership opponent, Brian Jean, is calling on your resignation. He says that you have lost the trust of Albertans and that it could cost the UCP the next election if you stay on as leader. So I want to know what's your reaction. What do you think Brian Jean's endgame is here?
He's been saying that for the better part of 2 years, so that's not really news. C'est pas exactement de nouvelles, les mêmes choses qu'il a dit depuis il a perdu le leadership.
Excellent. That's all our time for today. Thanks
very
joining
much,
us.
everyone.